Have you ever been discarded as if you were worthless? Have you ever been fired without warning, without explanation, in front of everyone? Robert went in front of colleagues, bosses, the entire company. He wasn't just dismissed, he was dehumanized. At that moment, something inside him broke. But it was at that very moment that something even greater was born. Robert Herjavec grew up in poverty, no English, no privilege. A son of immigrants from the former Yugoslavia, who fled an oppressive regime. But even after overcoming his difficult childhood, he fell again, only this time in front of everyone, in front of the entire country. It was on that day that he promised, "No one will ever control my destiny again." This is the story of how one man turned the pain of being fired into an empire, how he came out of the darkness to become the name behind millions. Robert Herjavec, the CEO born from dismissal. That it's not just another success story. It's the story of someone who was fired in front of everyone, discarded as if it were invisible. But don't forget this name, Robert Herjavec, because from the moment he was thrown out of that building, he decided that no one would ever again dictate the course of his life. They arrived in Canada with 2 suitcases and not a word of English. Robert was 8 years old. Scared, huddled on an airport bench, watching a world where no one understood him. The signs, the sounds, the people, everything seemed to speak an alien language. At school, he was the odd one out. I sat at the back. I got beaten up at recess, and when I tried to answer, no one understood, not even the teachers. But Robert didn't give up. He listened. He watched. Every new word was a weapon. Little by little, that silent boy began to understand, and the language that once hurt him would be the same one he would use decades later to build an empire. Long before creating companies, before fame, before being called a shark, Robert was just a boy hiding in the shadows of communist Yugoslavia. Your father was arrested for complaining about the government. Yes, just saying. And on a cold morning, with fear and few clothes in the suitcase, the Herjavec family fled, left everything behind, and he landed in a strange, frozen country called Canada. In communist Yugoslavia, a wrong opinion could cost you your freedom. Robert's father was not an activist. He was not a rebel leader. He was just an ordinary man who had the courage to say, "The government is wrong." It was enough. One gray morning, he was arrested, taken without defense, without trial, to tell the truth at the wrong time. The Herjavec family's new home was a basement, dark, cold, damp, no heat, no privacy, no dignity. In winter, the cold penetrated the walls. They slept in their coats, with thin blankets, and even thinner hope. Food was rationed, water heated in a pan, the bathroom shared with strangers from upstairs. Years passed in that basement, in the cold, in the silence, in the rejection. Most would have given up. He would have resigned himself. But Robert was not in the majority. While others saw weakness, he saw the test, and each test made him stronger, more focused, more prepared. Because when you grow up invisible, you learn to build in the dark. After years of struggling to survive, Robert got his first real job in tech. I worked hard. I arrived early. I left later. I believed that I was finally building a stable career. But stability is an illusion, and it all fell apart one ordinary morning. They called him into the room. There were no long explanations, just a piece of paper, a signature, and silence. He was out, in front of colleagues, in front of the country, in front of himself. The world did not stop. No one asked if he was okay. There was no hug, no anger, just emptiness. He was erased from the company, like a typo. That night, he didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling for hours, head spinning, chest aching. He didn't know what to do. But one thing was clear: never again would anyone have the power to disconnect him from his own story. Before technology, before the first computer, Robert Herjavec waited tables. He was a waiter, newspaper delivery boy, door-to-door salesman, jobs that almost no one sees, but they show who really wants to win. Every tip, every no, every delivery in the rain was an invisible brick in the construction of the man he would become. He didn't complain. I watched, and I learned. I learned to negotiate, smiling in rejection, maintaining your posture when no one respects you. Those days were not failures. They were training, because in the real world, it is on the street that you learn to win. After years of serving coffee, delivering newspapers, knocking on doors, he finally entered what seemed to be the real world. A technology company, clean environment, air-conditioned, promising. Robert was excited. He arrived first. He wanted to learn everything. I didn't have a diploma, but I was thirsty. For a while, he believed he had finally been accepted. But the corporate world has no memory, and much less loyalty. One morning, he was called into the room. Break, no warning, no conversation, no time to understand. He received a piece of paper, a thank you, and nothing more. He was sent away, simple as that. He wasn't just dismissed, it was discarded, like a number, in public. No respect, no empathy, not a single glance. It was there that he understood the world wasn't going to save him. He would have to build his own way out. And for the first time, the idea of creating your own company didn't seem like a dream. It felt like survival. He left the building without saying anything. The rain was falling fine, but the weight on my shoulders was much colder than the water. In his hand, a box with his belongings, half a pen, a notebook, and a dream that seemed buried. The city was moving, people were moving, and he just watched. But there, in that silence, he made a promise. I will never be disposable again. And on that day, Robert Herjavec began to build something invisible, an empire that no one saw, but that no one would be able to stop. He was at home, no job, no income, no direction, sitting at the kitchen table with an old notebook and a question in my head. What if I created something of my own? It was like that, in the silence, that the first seed of the empire was born. Robert decided to enter the digital security market, a sector that few understood. But he was used to being the misunderstood one. No partners, no capital, just courage and discipline. I slept for hours a night. He ate poorly, but the greatest hunger was for independence. Every small client closed was a personal victory. Each yes carried more emotion than money. There, in the basement of his own house, the company was born that, years later, would sell for hundreds of millions. Robert didn't reinvent himself overnight. He built himself on the ruins of what was left. He was alone, with a box in the corner of the room, and the feeling that the world had ended. But in the midst of the silence, an inner voice rose up. It wasn't anger, it wasn't despair, it was something new, fierce, hot. It was a question that burned like fire. What if I created something that no one could take away from me? It was there, in that colorless dawn, that Robert Herjavec has been reborn. Not as an employee, not as a loser, but as the architect of the future itself. He didn't know how. There were no guarantees. But for the first time, he didn't need permission. The days passed, and Robert didn't leave the house. No job, no calls, no direction. The sunlight came in through the window, but inside him, everything seemed dark. Mother would knock on the door with coffee. I asked if everything was okay. He just said, "I'm thinking." The family was worried. The friends disappeared. And inside him, there was only echo. The head screamed questions. And now, what to do? How do you start from scratch again? There were days of silence, no answers. Aimless, but also without giving up. There were days of silence, no answers, aimless, but also without giving up. Dramatic. Pause there, in that void. He decided to create something of his own. No boss, no badge, with no one to tell him he couldn't. It wasn't just a company. It was a silent cry for freedom, a rebirth, a response to the world that tried to silence him. That night, Robert didn't sleep. He planned, he dreamed, and it began with a pen, a notebook, and a heart in ruins. Robert wrote down his first idea, found a cybersecurity company. Nobody understood. Nobody believed it. But he didn't ask permission, no credit, no partners, without a single customer. Everything he had, it was the pain of being fired and the desire to never depend on anyone again. The nights were long, the errors constant, the no's infinite. But Robert knew he wasn't just building a system. I was building freedom. While the world slept, he was in the basement. While the others were recovering from Friday, he would spend the night between codes and cold coffee. Robert didn't have a team. There was no investment fund. There was no support. But there was something that no one could see: vision, anger, and discipline. Every small contract was a victory, each new customer an invisible achievement. There was no celebration, just work. While others sought stability, he sought freedom. Years without proper sleep, no holidays, no guarantees. But now the answers were coming. A new contract, then another, then another. The name Herjavec began to circulate in the market, timidly at first, but impossible to ignore over time. He wasn't just closing deals. I was building authority. Robert had no pedigree, but it had credibility. Conquered line by line. Sleepless nights. For sleepless nights, while the world watched a rising entrepreneur, he knew he was a survivor. No office, no furniture, no money, but there was a basement, cold, dark, empty. That's where he decided to start. He set up a table with old boards, a used computer, and a light bulb hanging on the wire. While others were looking for investors, he built an empire in the basement of his own house. There was no meeting room. There was no secretary. There was no prestige. But there was something no one could buy: willing and the courage to start exactly with what I had. He didn't have an investor. There was no glass building, not even a decent chair. But it had a basement. It was there, between peeling walls and exposed wires, that Robert Herjavec set up his first office. An improvised table, an old computer, a light bulb hanging by a thread. He worked 18 hours a day. I slept on the floor, with a coat as a pillow and a to-do list in my head. I ate noodles 3 times a day. There wasn't enough money for more, but he didn't complain, because I knew every bite typed was a brick in the foundation of their freedom. While the others were resting, he doubled shifts. While some posted motivational phrases, he built in silence. There, between broken sleep and broken code, something greater than himself was being born. After weeks of silence, a notification flashed on the screen. It was an answer, then another, and then the first yes, a small contract, modest value. But for him, it was the whole world saying, "Keep going." 2 more came, then 5, small, inconstant, but real. They were the first bricks. The foundation was beginning to form. Each client was more than just revenue. It was a response to the world. I can do it, even alone. In the beginning, no one answered your emails. No one answered his calls. Nobody knew his name. He was invisible, but he didn't give up until the world could no longer ignore it. The boy from the basement. Now he was CEO of one of the fastest growing technology companies in Canada. The contracts were already worth over 6 figures. The clients were banks, governments, multinationals. The company that was born from a layoff was now valued in the millions. Pause with rising track, and then the proposal arrived. Robert sold his company for over $125 million. But unlike others, he didn't stop there. It wasn't about money. It was about control. It was about freedom. It was about showing the world that the invisible won. He spent years ignored. But when he won, the world *** had no choice but to applaud. Checks have increased, opportunities too. But nothing impressed me more than a simple truth. He did everything without shortcuts. The financial turnaround was brutal. The company exploded in value. But the true value was what he built within himself. He didn't just want money. He wanted the right to never be ignored again. And now, the whole world wanted to hear what he had to say. What began as a solitary enterprise started to attract attention. Emails now came with bank signatures, agencies, and technology giants. Robert Herjavec, previously ignored, now it was disputed. And then, the proposal came. $225 million United States dollars for the company built in silence, with sweat, with cold coffee and sleepless nights. He didn't inherit. He didn't get lucky. He created. After years in the basement, after whole nights, awake after being rejected, humiliated, forgotten. There he was, faced with a contract with 9 digits. There was no audience. There was no applause, just a pen, and to hands tremendous. At that moment, he didn't hear anything, just the sound of your own heart saying, "You win." He could stop there, sell everything, disappear, live in peace. Robert Herjavec was not looking for peace. I was looking for permanence. Because the dream, it was never money. The dream was a legacy. He had already won for himself. Now he wanted to win for others. And that's when the world saw him as a mentor, as an investor. Like a shark, the invisible boy became a technology giant. But Robert Herjavec didn't stop there. His name reached the ears of producers, mentors, and investors. And then the invitation came. One of the most coveted seats in global entrepreneurship, Shark Tank. There, in front of the cameras, the world met not just one investor. He met a man forged in pain, someone who knew exactly what it meant to hear no. Therefore, his sins carried weight. His empathy was real. His vision was that of someone who had already built from scratch. Robert Herjavec is no longer just a name. It became a symbol of overcoming, of practical intelligence, of silent courage. His authority did not come from titles. It came from experience, from subscriber, of falls and decisions. Your presence has changed. When he entered a room or a studio, everyone listened, not by the voice, but for the story. His public image was clean, but with scars, and that was precisely what inspired. Years ago, he was the ignored man, the boy who got beaten up at school, the employee fired without warning. Now, he received an invitation that would change everything. To sit next to the country's biggest investors. The show was Shark Tank. What about Robert Herjavec? Was one of the chosen ones. It wasn't just a TV show. It was confirmation. It was the voice of the world saying, "Now it's your turn to decide who deserves a chance." While others invested coldly, Robert listened with his heart. He knew the anxiety of someone presenting an idea, the fear of failure, the pain of a dry no. That's why every word of his carried weight. Every piece of advice came from someone who had already bled. Robert didn't just invest in businesses. He invested in people, in stories, in difficult decisions, which he knew well. And that was why who became the most respected shark by those who ever sat across the table. Iconic lines that demonstrate his authority balanced with empathy. It shows that he listens with his heart, but is not weak. Don't mistake my kindness for weakness. Robert Herjavec, if you're emotional and you're great at something, the money will follow. Perfect for reinforcing your sensitivity to entrepreneurs, demonstrating that material success is a consequence of courage and passion. A goal without a timeline is just a dream. Use it to show that discipline was essential in his journey. Every step had a deadline. Every dream had a plan. He listened calmly. I didn't interrupt. I didn't rush it. Because Robert knew, he knew what it was like to be rejected. That's why I didn't reject it easily. He saw more than numbers. He saw people via courage. Because one day, it was his courage that was not ignored. Robert Herjavec did not become great because he sought to be a giant. He became a giant because he learned to survive being small. Your legacy is not in the millions, not even in companies. It's in the message your story carries. You might fall. It can be rejected. It can be forgotten. But still, can build something the world will never ignore again. Today, Robert invests in ideas, but it also invests in people. Invest in those who have not yet been seen, because he remembers perfectly what it's like to be invisible. This is his true philosophy of life, lifting others up from the place where he once fell. At the end, it's not about how much you earn, it's about how much you resist before you start winning. Robert Herjavec was fired, ignored, and invisible, but he decided on something simple. My story doesn't end in the basement. If you are being tested now, maybe it's being forged. If nobody believes in you, maybe you need to be the first to believe, because the next impossible story could be yours. It all starts with the decision not to stop. True wealth, it's not the money that comes in, it's the right to say no, to choose, to create your own path. Freedom is when no one else has the power to decide for you. And that's what Robert Herjavec achieved, control over one's own life. But none of this came easy. He was tested, rejected, forgotten, but never gave up. Because, in the end, it all comes down to one thing: persistence.